say you're fine, but I can see right through. You're holding your secrets for way too long. This can't keep going on. With every lie, they keep on hurting you, getting away with everything they do. This can't keep going on. No, we're gonna find them, and I'm gonna fight for you. They better start hiding. We'll be running with the lions, lions. We'll be running with the lions, lions. They can't run, they can't hide. We won't stop until they're down. We'll be running with the lions, lions.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Gloves Off. Have you ever wondered what it takes to scale Mount Kilimanjaro? What does it feel like when you're a woman that maybe is a little different? You don't really fit the traditional norms. What would it take to completely change your life from a myriad of different circumstances and careers, and all of a sudden to follow your passion to help people rewrite their stories and transform their lives from the inside out? Well, that's exactly what my next guest did, Veronica Weedon. And I'm so excited because as I was actually watching my show opener, I realized that it literally is all the things that she's done. We've got somebody scaling a mountain. We've got a woman on a motorcycle. So somehow I had all these things in mind when we created that show opener, because interestingly, I have a lot of those same aspirations. Maybe not the mountain. I don't think I could scale a mountain, but I love the idea of motorcycles and whatnot. So anyway, for those of you who are new, this is Gloves Off, and this is a show where we really talk about transformation. Meaning that my guests are courageous enough to do what they really want to do in life, be their authentic selves, and show up in a way that is true to them. And every week I have a special guest, and this week, as I mentioned, is Veronica. She is actually joining us from Europe. And, honestly, I have to say that the show has really brought a lot of joy to my life, because the people that I get to meet, not only from all over the country, but all over the world, is pretty amazing. And we're actually about to be on our first year in February. So pretty exciting stuff. So I would like to obviously thank our sponsor, Elevated CPA, for sponsoring the show every week. And then we are going to deep dive into our interview. All right. So just a little reminder, if you guys are enjoying the show and you want to send other people to view it, probably the easiest way is to watch it on my YouTube channel. I find that everybody says that's the easiest way, unless you're streaming it on A360 TV. So there's the QR code so that you can easily find the YouTube channel. It's drkalpana.unbound. It's the same on Instagram and Facebook as well, if that's easier for you. But I find that it's a little difficult to find the show on those platforms. And also we stream live on LinkedIn as well. All right. So, as I mentioned, Veronica lives in Europe, and she mentioned to me when we had our first phone call that she just, did a whole bunch of different things in her life and eventually wound up in wellness, which of course is a passion of mine as well. So, it's interesting how people wind up doing things that may not necessarily make sense, but then all of a sudden you just know that you utilize all those skills. And I'm speaking for her when I say this because I don't know if this is even true, but I say this because that's what I found in my life. I generally have followed and pursued interests that are interesting to me. And sometimes I don't have any clue how they fit together. But when I switched careers, I realized that I was able to use a lot of those things and all those bits of knowledge from my other journeys into my new career. So I'm excited to find out if that's the case for her. So without further ado, let's get Veronica on our stage. Well, it helps if I actually had you on there.
Hello.
Hello, good evening, and welcome to Gloves Off. And I'm so glad and excited to have you here.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here. I'm looking forward to this chat.
Well, first, I was just speculating before I got you on here. Did you feel that, I know you had sort of a varied career path, which a bunch of different things before you decided on your path to wellness and helping people with RTT and really transforming and rewiring their lives. But did you notice that you were able to use those skills?
Yeah, I think because I'd had such a varied career and I'd worked across industry in different roles, it was more my, I guess, ability to observe people somewhat differently that really carried through and that helps me a lot in this work. And of course, through the studying that I did and the techniques that we use, that comes as well. But I felt when I entered this field of work that really came from my past, sort of an ability to, a little bit like detective work, if that makes sense, to, see what's really going on behind the surface.
That's really interesting. So I'm curious. So tell us a little bit about maybe the careers or the jobs that you had where you were able to identify that this was a thread that was woven into the fabric of all of these different positions that you were doing.
So it actually started even before my career, but in school, I was quite athletic and I ended up being the captain of a few different sports teams. And so through the coaching back then, I learned at quite a young age sort of how to motivate people or to see through, because what motivates one isn't the same from the next, and gain a few of those skills there. And then in my first job, I had a lot to do with the space industry. So yes, astronauts were involved. And that's obviously quite a unique profession and skill. And it was an organization that still exists today, and they do amazing work. And they create and manage multi-million-dollar incentive prizes to catalyze the development of new technologies. So these are all very visionary people, pioneers, breaking barriers, breaking boundaries, opening up new industries. And so to learn and just observe people like that and be in a room with people like that and watch how they work and do what they do taught me a lot. It was really a fascinating time and I loved working there.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And then transitioning to a different industry, still sort of in sales and marketing. I worked in the tech industry for quite a few years. And there I was primarily working with CEOs of startup tech companies. So there again, people who are trying to create something, to build something, to break barriers and to see what motivates them and how they function and how they tick. And so that theme really carried through. And then I transitioned to the transport and logistics industry, which was a whole nother ball game as well. But there, it was actually a mid-sized company, but privately run. And that was really interesting to see as well, the motivations of a privately held company and how that works. So Yeah, I learned a lot through all the different roles I held.
Well, I would say that there are people who do different, jobs or have different careers, but they might not notice these nuances that you're noticing. So
Mm-hmm.
that probably clued you in when maybe you had conversations with other people that you're noticing things or you're putting things together in a different way. At least that's what I'm sensing out of you.
Yeah, I think I've always been an analytical person. At least I feel that way. It hasn't always been perceived as a good thing, but but it's certainly helped me with what I do today. So yeah.
Perfect. Perfect. So tell me about then what led to this transformation of, these other careers that you were doing, which I'm sure served you well for a time, but then something really shifted in your life that led you to what you're doing now.
It was a few things. So when I was working for, I'm going to put regular jobs in quotation marks, really just being an employee somewhere else. So throughout those jobs, in the later part of my career, they were all good companies doing good things, but I didn't feel as if they were having a greater impact on the planet, if that makes sense, or on people's lives. So obviously they were providing a valuable service, but I felt like I wanted more somehow. It's a bit difficult to explain. The company I started with, so in the space industry, that was more aligned with the sort of grandeur and the largesse and really breaking boundaries and advancing things. And I felt like I wanted to just make more of a difference in people's lives. So that was one part of sort of searching for something else. And then the transition really came when I hit rock bottom in life. So I went through quite a few years of a very difficult period personally in my life. So my brother passed away very suddenly. And that was a very complicated, very messy situation, very difficult for the family. And then I was also in a highly toxic relationship with a covert narcissist for a long time, which took a huge toll on me. And there were just a lot of things going on, and my health started declining in a big way. So I had a brain seizure. I started having short-term memory loss and vision loss. And I had a herniated disc, which led me to emergency back surgery, which saved me from paralysis. The surgeon said if I waited another day or so, I would have been in a wheelchair for the rest of my life. So they weren't small things. It wasn't like, oh, I'm tired. It was, the issues, the physical symptoms I was having were getting more significant and also starting to recur. So once I felt like I'd solved the problem, it would then reoccur maybe a year later. And then I had a few other family members who passed away as well, all during this time period. So it was just very heavy. And like I said, physically, I was on the decline in a big way, to the point where I couldn't even function anymore. And I felt like a shadow of myself. And no doctor could explain why all these things were happening to me. And so from a timing perspective, it was interesting because all the court cases surrounding my brother's death came to an end, and I got out of that really terrible relationship at the same time. And that's also when I decided to leave the job I was in, because I was just hitting rock bottom, and I needed just out from everything. And it all came at the same time. Mm-hmm. And that was at the end of 2019, so about 5 years ago now. Mm-hmm. And I was so low, and then I went into a deep depression as well. So I really do understand people who hit rock bottom, because I was there, I lived it, and I was very unwell. And I was at the point where I knew I had a decision to make. So either check out or change, because I just couldn't keep living the same way that I was living. If I was going to stay, then I needed to do something different. And that was really the beginning of my realization of how we are truly responsible for our own lives. And because you just make a very conscious decision, say, okay, no, I'm going to change. Because if we're always waiting for someone or something else to change, then, take it from me, we can wait a very long time. Yeah, and that then set me on a journey first, really, to get myself back to wellness and understand why all these things had been happening to me, just in my environment and in my life and in my body physically, and beginning to understand the patterns that I was in, and yeah, that was the turning point of my journey, which ultimately led me to do what I do today.
Well, there's so much really to unpack there in that story of your journey, because first, clearly you were doing good work, but you didn't feel like you were making the impact that you wanted to in your life. You wanted to create a bigger impact. I mean, that's what I heard when you were saying what you were, describing as part of your journey. So A, you wanted to make a bigger impact, but also you were almost, I don't want to say victimized, but I think there are parts in our lives where we feel like we're victims and things just happen to us and
100%.
we don't have control. I know I've been there, and I feel like I can speak about, that from my journey. Then all of a sudden, like you said, you realize that we do have control. We can create and shape our reality to what we want. So there was a lot there. So thank you so much for sharing that, because I think there's so many important points in everything you said. But my next question to you is, when you said the doctors couldn't figure out what was going on with you and you were able to finally see what it was, what was that?
It was definitely a journey, and think of it like an onion. And I started to peel back the layers, one layer at a time, through a lot of the different therapies and things that I did on my own healing journey, or I like to refer to it as a journey of self-evolution, because I think we're always evolving if we so choose. And it ended up being a combination, or the key lessons in all of it, which I do believe apply to everybody. Because like you said, I was absolutely a victim. I was stuck in victimhood, even though I didn't consciously know that. Like, I didn't think I was a victim. I didn't feel like I was being a victim. And yet I did. That's the reality that I was living. And I don't think there's a person on the planet who hasn't at some point in their life felt like a victim. But I also believe, because of what I see all around me all the time, a lot of people do live in victimhood, but they're not conscious of it. So there's a divide between the conscious and the subconscious, right? And this is a lot of what we address through RTT and hypnotherapy. And this was my case as well, and part of the unraveling. And we are, if you think of us like a computer system, and our subconscious is a software program it's running. So we pick up in childhood, we pick up, or we form beliefs about ourselves for a good reason, because children live purely in their emotions. We don't develop logic until between the ages of approximately 7 to 10 years old. So before that, a child lives through their emotions purely. And so what happens is, when we don't get our needs met from our caregivers, because we need our caregivers to survive, we adopt beliefs, which then lead to behaviors in order to attempt to get those needs met. So, for example, if I am not getting the attention or the affection or the care that I need as a child, because if we go back to Maslow's triangle and look at the basic needs, right? Safety, security, food, love, affection. Then I might develop the belief is, oh, well, I'm not lovable. And in order to become lovable, then usually people take on one of 4 roles. And once you hear this, honestly, you're gonna look at families and you'll start to see it everywhere. It's fascinating. So wow. The 4 roles are the carer. So you take on a role of caring for others. You take on the role of the overachiever. You take on the role of the rebel, or the sick. Because in any and all of those 4 roles, if you think about it, if I'm always sick, someone has to care for me, right? So it's a way of getting attention and affection, whether that's a doctor or a nurse or a teacher, but somebody is going to or that's the idea, right, that someone will take care of me. If I overachieve, I might get, the love and affection, the praise that I require. If I rebel, I'm going to get attention. It may not be good attention, but it's attention. So the sick, the rebel, the overachiever, and the carer. So those are the 4 roles, all of which serve a purpose. And again, they stem from a belief that I'm not worthy, I'm not lovable. At the core of all of them really is I'm not enough. And again, they're not irrational beliefs. Like they are formed for a reason, and the behaviors result from it in order to survive, because a young child cannot survive without a caretaker. Their very survival depends on it. But what ends up happening is then we grow into adulthood, but these beliefs and behaviors are so ingrained in our subconscious. It's a software program that just keeps on running, and we're not even conscious of it. We're not aware. But that's why you see in so many people's lives, and this was my life too, I kept repeating a pattern without even knowing that I was doing it. So all my relationships were highly unhealthy. They just got worse and worse, and sort of it escalated until I ended up in this very, very toxic relationship with a covert narcissist, which was just, not a good place to be, not a safe place to be, not a good place to be. And it escalated more and more. And unfortunately, a lot of people experience this because we're not aware of the underlying program that's running.
Well, I find that so fascinating. And yes, I would say that I can see that in already people I'm just thinking of.
You can't unsee it once you see it.
Right. So, but I have a question. Is it possible to have blends of them to some degree?
It's absolutely possible to shift roles over time. So that was the case, for example, with me. So if you look at, especially with multiple siblings, right? So you'll see that everybody in the family has a role. So in my family, my mother was the sick, so she had multiple sclerosis since from when I was born. So I grew up with an ill mother and a firsthand front row seat to what it looks like to lose your health and what the toll that takes on you physically and emotionally and the people around you. So she was the sick. My father was the carer in the end, so he ended up being her carer. My brother was overachiever, and I was the youngest, so the only role left was the rebel. So I started out as the rebel, but then later my brother and I sort of shifted roles, and I became the overachiever and he became the rebel. And so it is absolutely possible to change over time and shift, but generally speaking, you'll always be able to identify those 4 roles.
So interesting. So it so much resonates with that in my family dynamic. It was the same thing. My mother was always the sick. My father was the caregiver. And she wasn't sick the whole time. He was always but once she got sick, and it was long, protracted sickness, and he was the caregiver. And then I was originally the rebel, but then I shifted into the overachiever.
So same,
Exactly. I mean, I'm not going to lie, I still have quite a little bit of that rebel in me, but I would say I would have identified more with the overachiever, but that was my journey to work through as well. I knew there was a toxic reason why I was doing this, but I didn't understand it back when I was.
And the thing is, a lot of these behaviors end up becoming quite compulsive, or they're forms of addiction, right? You see it in a lot of mothers. They often have the caring role, but there are no boundaries, right? It's everybody else before me. And so caring for someone is not bad. Just like, doing really well and wanting to overachieve, that's not bad. And everybody gets sick sometime. And like, none of these things are bad. This is probably not the ideal phrasing, but I'm going to say in moderation, right? They're all okay. The issue is when they're so ingrained in your subconscious and you're not aware that this is happening, that's when all the boundaries start to fall away. And generally they're taken to extremes, which ultimately then is a form of addiction, right? It's any type of codependence is a form of addiction.
I would agree. And I've talked about this before too. Anything that you're doing overindulging in, it can be a form of an addiction, even though it looks good. mothering, all of these things. You know, you could say, oh, I volunteer a lot. I keep busy all the time, all of those things. And I feel it's the reason why you do it that makes a difference. And also if you're playing a role. So for example, I still like to make an impact in this world. I'm just doing it from a different, more authentic place. Meaning that I give myself rest time. I give myself time to just be. I don't have to be doing something all the time, but that wasn't my life, 5-10 years ago.
Yeah, because you gained an awareness. Because think about it again, that's the behavior that we were talking about. But go back to the underlying belief that led to the behavior, because the behavior is a symptom, right? But the root cause then is the underlying belief. It's I'm not worthy, I'm not lovable, I'm not enough, I'm not, all these things. And so the behavior is just a way to try to get that external validation that you are lovable, that you are enough, that you are good, that you are, whatever it is that you feel you're lacking.
So what about the opposite thing? What about, okay, I know that a lot of people do feel like they're not enough, but there are quite a few people out there who just feel like they're too much and therefore cannot be loved or understood. What do you...
So give me an example. So are you talking about like overt narcissism, or are you talking about an example?
For women, I speak about women that I meet because obviously I coach and consult with a lot of female entrepreneurs. Many of them fall into the other category that they don't feel like they're enough and they tend to overachieve. But then there are a small subset of these women who believe that they're too much. They believe they're too loud. They're too this, they're too that. They're too much of everything. And they tend to do the opposite, dim themselves down in order to fit in, which also is not good. So usually I'm talking to them about expressing themselves fully, being their full authentic self. But do you feel that there's a reason that some people are showing up this way? Or I don't know. I personally just feel it's their authenticity, that's just the way they're wired. But I'm just curious to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I think, each situation needs to be looked at in and of itself. But generally speaking, I would say the underlying belief is probably the same. Because if they feel, the question is, why are they so loud? Because they need to be heard, right? And then if they dim themselves, well, because they feel like they're too much, it's still an underlying belief of, I need external validation of something. If you say I'm too much, you're still looking for someone to tell you, oh, no, you're not.
That's a good point.
Right? So the core belief is still probably, I'm not good enough, or I'm not enough.
The real issue really is to turn that external validation into that internal validation and look for that within yourself of you feeling just right in the way that you are. And I don't know what you believe, but I believe that our soul comes into this existence knowing, and then all our traumas and all our things shape us, and then we show up in different ways. And I feel like so much of my journey and my goal has been to find that authenticity that without all the trauma and without all the things that we've lived through, to find what that core essence of my soul really is.
Yeah, 100%. We are spiritual beings having a human experience. And as humans, the only way we experience things in this three-dimensional reality is through our senses. So we see, we hear, we taste, we touch, but our feelings are actually our compass. So when we feel good, we know we are aligned with our inner being, with that source energy. When we don't feel good, we know we're out of alignment. And if you think about it, this is why, go back to babies. When we're born, we all think we're just, God's gift to earth. Like, think about it, everything revolves around this baby. The baby doesn't think, oh, I'm not going to wake up screaming in the middle of the night because it might upset my parents. It doesn't think that. It thinks, I pooped, clean me, or, I need attention, clean me. It's so pure because there's no corruption yet. But unfortunately, at a very young age, if the needs aren't met, then beliefs are formed because they're only in this emotion. But babies we're essentially, the rest of our lives, we're trying to get back to the alignment that we had when we were born.
That's a beautiful way to put it. That really is. I love that. So tell us, with what you're doing now, how does I know you're using RTTs. So tell, for the people who don't know what that is, if you'll just explain a little bit about what you do and the modalities in which you help people get back to their true essence.
Yeah. So through my journey, I tried so many different things, really, from climbing Mount Kilimanjaro to ayahuasca for longer periods of time, from a psychologist to lots of courses and books and personal trainers, really working on the mind, spirit, and body. So I'm such a big believer in the mind-body connection, because that's what I learned through my journey and identified. And all the physical symptoms that I had make so much sense to me now. There's always a correlation between the physical symptom and the emotional root cause. So every physical symptom has an emotional root cause. So I'll just give you a quick example. Like I mentioned, I started to lose my vision very slowly, and I wasn't seeing what was right in front of me. So that's why it was the eyes. Do you see? Like there's always a correlation as to what and where and how something's happening in the body, compared to the belief for what's going on a subconscious level.
Interestingly, I had thyroid cancer about 20 years ago, and it affected my vocal cord nerve. And luckily, everything's fine, and I'm fine now. But I had the treatment, but the tumor was actually on the vocal cord nerve, and so I could have really lost my voice.
Yeah.
But what was I not doing? Speaking my truth.
Yeah, we're afraid to be heard. Yeah,
we're afraid to be heard, and now that is the thing. Every time that's one thing I always make sure I do. I always make sure I speak my truth from a place of love, obviously, but I have to. It's just something I can't not do anymore.
Yeah. Every time I got sick from when I was really young, the first thing was always I got laryngitis. I lost my voice too. Every time I got sick, my voice just went immediately. It was always laryngitis before anything else. Yeah. And
I very much believe that. I've seen it manifest in my own life, that certain things start to happen. I was having some shoulder. I did hurt my shoulder doing martial arts, but it took a really long time to heal. It was my left shoulder. It was around the time my mother was in the hospital, not doing well, and I suspected this wasn't going to end well. That pain lingered until until everything resolved. I mean, unfortunately not in the way that I would have wanted, but finally the shoulder pain went away. No rhyme or reason.
Because you felt like you were carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders, and the left side is generally the mother, and the right side.
I think was what I was told it was grief and mother. Oh, interesting.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, lots of different theories, lots of different.
So there is. I really do believe in that. I feel that, again, Western medicine does not look at this, and there should be a more integrated form of understanding what's going on. I mean, obviously you should make sure nothing's structurally wrong, but if there isn't, which for me there wasn't, I made sure there was nothing wrong, but I was really having a lot of pain.
But exactly. This is not, holistic health to me is not an anti-medical, anti-doctor campaign in any way, shape or form. Because again, if I didn't have the neurosurgeon to do my back surgery, I would have been in a wheelchair for the rest of my life. So absolutely. I think it's working in tandem together. And if there is something seriously wrong, always go get it, get the x-ray, get the scan, get it checked out. But there's so much we can do from a holistic perspective to help with the healing process, but more importantly, work preventatively so that we don't even end up at the doctor or with things.
Right. And I apologize. I got you a little distracted because you were explaining how this, and I was like, "Oh, I just found that so interesting." But anyway, so I didn't want to sidetrack you from telling us about RTT and the techniques that you use. So
not at all. So I really believe in this holistic approach, and so the physical side of things. So when I work with clients, I always advise them to get their microbiome analyzed. So there's tools, and it's so simple. And I'm affiliated with a company that does this. And so it's get the microbiome analyzed so that you understand what foods work for you. It's so interesting. You get, because there's so much information about nutrition and diets and everything out there. And I don't believe in diets. There's very high percentage failure rate, and often it's yo-yo, which is more unhealthy, and I just don't believe in it. I believe in sustainability and long-term care, so you can get your list of your superfoods, so foods that really nourish you based on your microbiome, because your microbiome is as unique as your DNA. And that's the other issue with general nutritional information and diets out there. It's sort of a one size fits all, but we're all unique. So that doesn't mean that the diet is bad or that, spinach is bad. For most people, spinach is good, but for some people, believe it or not, it's actually not beneficial. So that's why knowing and understanding your own microbiome, I think, can go such a long way in supporting a healing process if that's what you're going through, or just working preventatively. So know what foods to avoid, know what your superfoods are and which foods you can enjoy based on your own microbiome. So that's the physical side of things. Then, of course, there's always movement, right? Call it exercise. I like to refer to it as feel goods. And I know there are a lot of people out there say, I hear it so often. It's like, oh, I feel I have to run or I have to do cardio. And then I say again, but that's not going to be sustainable. If you hate it, you're just not going to do it. You might force yourself to do, but one, where's the fun in that? And two, you'll just never sustain it. So there are ways that I can help people and that I help them identify actually a form of movement or exercise that they will enjoy, because we all have one and they're special. Yeah, there's certain ways to do this. And I always find it very interesting. And people generally like that too. They're like, oh, okay, I can do this. And then they end up enjoying it. And then working up to the mind and spirit. So RTT is rapid transformation therapy. And it's a form of hypnotherapy where we essentially work on one specific issue at a time. So if it is a health issue, or if it's a phobia, or if it's a pattern of toxic relationships, for example, or a pattern of something else, we focus on one issue at a time. And we go back, I put you into hypnosis, and then we go back to find the root cause, the how, why, when, and where you created that issue. And so generally we go back to 3 scenes or events in your life. And then the goal is to take an objective look at your subjective self and understand how, why, when, and where they were created, because there's always a reason. And then to upgrade them. So reform them, because it's not the events that happen to us that matter. It's the meaning that we give to them. And so we're going to reform it and then transform it by upgrading to new beliefs. And so that's the process of rapid transformation therapy and how I use hypnotherapy in general. And then, yeah, of course, a lot of the education around mind-body connection, and there's a lot involved. So
I love that. I mean, it's such I feel it's unique because you're using that gut biome, and that's really, really important. Mm-hmm. Also, the movement piece, very important. It's funny. I felt like you were saying exactly the thing I say to my clients, because most of my clients are in the healthcare field and whatnot. Yeah. Because they're, entrepreneurs, and they just avoid. Sometimes they're not doing enough exercise, enough movement. Yeah. That's exactly what I tell them. Find something you like, something that you commit to. I don't care if it's just a few minutes every day, but just do something that's sustainable.
Yeah.
That's wonderful.
Because health is not a goal, it's a lifestyle. So what we're doing is we're not talking about short-term change. It's long-term change, and therefore preventative care that we're really aiming for.
Well, I always say you can choose your hard. It's hard to be healthy. It's hard to be sick. It's hard to be rich. It's hard to be poor. It's hard to be an employee. It's hard to be an entrepreneur. Choose your hard. If
you don't make time for your wellness, your body will make sure you make time for your illness. So
100%. That's what I'm very big on that, because I've watched too many people not focus on their wellness, and they've got a lot of sickness. I'd rather spend a lot of time on the front end worrying about my wellness, so I hope to never get sick again. I've already been there, done that. I've had enough of it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, been there, done that. But of course, there are always little things, and
of course.
And talking about we create our own reality, even when things like accidents happen. So I broke my leg at the end of last year, so actually just over a year ago now. And you think, oh, well, that's an accident, it doesn't count. But I figured out, actually, no, there was a reason. Like there was an underlying subconscious reason why that needed to happen to get me to something else. So even when you feel like things are not within your control, I would argue that there very well might still be an underlying belief or thought pattern that's going on that attracted that.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I'm in alignment with you on that. So now I want to talk a little bit more about some of the hobbies and the things that interest you, because of course I'm interested because you and I are very similar in that way. I haven't yet had the chance to have this discussion with somebody because it's hard being very different from other women. And I have felt this my whole life. And I finally just got to the point where I'm owning it, but it's taken me a really long time. So you've scaled Kilimanjaro, not a thing that most women do, number one. You love motorcycles and, all these, you like space and all that. And most women are not even interested in that. And I'm not, I'm going to stop myself right now and say, I'm not trying to stereotype anyone or anything. I'm just saying that the majority. So what happens to people that are women or men, really, it's really not just women, that are not in that general realm of what society's used to, it makes it hard to feel like we fit in. I don't know if you've had that experience or.
100%. I have felt different most of my life, and honestly, still to a certain extent, because as I already mentioned, when I was young, I was very athletic, loved sports. That's sort of where I channeled a lot of my inner workings, and at that time, it was very uncool for women to be athletic. So fortunately now I think it is considered cool and there are a lot more women in sports and it's growing, which I think is amazing. At the time I was in school, I was just called butch and a man and a beast, and because I was strong and athletic and a lot of very unflattering things, and because I did a lot of sports. And then later on, when I started riding motorcycles, I was instantly called a lesbian. And again, like I have no, like about sexuality, each to their own. Truly, I have no feelings about everybody should just do what they want to do. But
if that's not you, you don't want to be called something that you're not.
Prejudgment because I ride motorcycles makes me this I was like, well, no, I'm not. Mm-hmm. What is why does that mean that? It was, again, it's sort of an assumption and a judgment, and nobody likes to be judged on anything. But I will say, again, after all this work that I've done and learning and evolving, we feel different. We've talked about it, but so does everybody else.
That's true.
I'm not kidding. Everybody in the world feels different in some way, shape, or form. And the irony is, that's what makes us all similar. The fact that we all feel different in some way, that is exactly what makes us the same.
That's a great way to put it. You're right. And if we examine the psyche of anyone and everyone, even if they fit in the traditional senses, they probably have something that we feel like
they do. I promise you, they do.
That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. I guess really what at the end of the day, what we need to all realize is that we should have and embrace the freedom to do what is in our heart, live our lives the way that we want to, and do the things that we enjoy without feeling that judgment from other people. And I've really done a great job of eliminating people who judge me in any way out of my life.
Yeah, that's the thing when you start on a journey like this, and once you learn and once you understand and once you begin to change, you can't go back. It's sort of like, you really can't. And then in most cases, the people around you do change, and a lot of people that you associated with for a long time maybe start to fall away because